Churchill versus Machiavelli, leadership under fire. Before we talk about leadership, we need to talk about fear. Not fear as panic, not fear as emotion, fear as a force. Fear does something subtle but decisive. It changes how people think together. Under normal conditions, people evaluate arguments, they compare options, they debate trade-offs. Under fear, that process collapses. People stop asking what is right. They stop asking what is optimal. They ask something else. What will hold? Fear compresses time. It shortens attention. It makes extreme options feel reasonable. Things that once sounded reckless start to sound decisive. Things that once sounded patient start to sound weak. This is why fear is never neutral. It reshapes perception before it reshapes behavior. And when fear spreads through a system, leadership changes meaning. Leadership is no longer about vision. It is no longer about inspiration. It becomes structural. Either it stabilizes the system or it accelerates its collapse. History is full of moments like this. Moments where institutions still exist on paper, but confidence in them begins to thin. Moments where people follow not because they are convinced, but because they are afraid of the alternatives. History does not usually collapse in explosions. It collapses quietly, in hesitations, in half-decisions, in moments where uncertainty becomes unbearable. May 1940 is one of those moments. Britain is not yet defeated. There are no German troops on British soil, but the structure is no longer stable. France is collapsing. The British Expeditionary Force is exposed on the continent. Evacuation is uncertain. Invasion is no longer theoretical. Inside government, disagreement hardens. Inside the public, anxiety spreads faster than information. The channel, once a guarantee, now feels like a thin line on a map. This is the kind of moment where leadership does not inspire crowds. It calms systems, or it breaks them. At the center of this moment stand a new Prime Minister, Winston Churchill, not chosen for calm times, not elevated by consensus, but forced into office by collapse elsewhere. And this matters, because crisis leadership is not judged by intention, it is judged by effect. Every sentence matters, every pause matters, because under fear, people do not listen for hope, they listen for stability. 5 centuries earlier, another man is observing a similar pattern. Not bombers, not armies, but instability. Niccolò Machiavelli lives in a world where collapse is routine. Italian city-states rise and fall with alarming speed. Alliances shift. Loyalty is temporary. He does not write about ideal leadership. He writes about failure, about why systems unravel, about why rulers lose power even when they believe they are acting morally. Machiavelli's central concern is not virtue, it is survival. Not personal survival, but political survival. What allows authority to endure when fear becomes dominant? This is where his thinking becomes uncomfortable, because Machiavelli is not interested in how leadership should feel. He is interested in what works when conditions deteriorate. And this is why he remains relevant, not because his world resembles ours, but because the mechanics of fear have not changed. This video brings these two figures together, not to compare personalities, not to judge character, but to examine mechanisms. What actually holds people together under pressure? How does legitimacy form when trust is scarce? How can fear be used to focus behavior without turning into hatred? And why do some leaders, even well-intentioned ones, accelerate collapse without realizing it? These questions matter far beyond history, because modern organizations rarely face invasion, but they face uncertainty constantly. Market shocks, internal conflict, technological disruption, strategic ambiguity. And in those moments, the same dynamics apply. Under pressure, people stop evaluating strategy. They evaluate leaders. Not consciously, but structurally. They listen for signals. Does this person sound anchored or reactive? Do they reduce uncertainty or multiply it? This is why leadership in crisis is never about charisma. Charisma can even be dangerous. What matters is coherence, the alignment between words and reality, between tone and situation, between promise and capacity. Churchill in 1940 understands this instinctively. He does not offer comfort. He does not predict outcomes. He names costs. And in doing so, he removes illusion. Illusion in crisis is not hope, it is risk. Because illusions create expectations, and unmet expectations create resentment. This does not make Machiavelli cynical. It makes him realistic. He understands that under fear, people crave structure more than kindness. But here is where the story becomes interesting. Because Churchill does not rule through cruelty. He does not threaten his population. He does not shame doubt. He does something more subtle. He frames fear. He gives it direction. And in doing so, he avoids the one thing Machiavelli warns against most: hatred. Hatred is not anger. Hatred is personal. And personal fear turns leaders into targets. Machiavelli understands this. Churchill senses it. Both are operating on the same terrain, even if they would never agree on language. So the question is not whether Churchill was Machiavellian. The question is deeper. Was Churchill intuitively applying hard rules through human language? And if so, what does that tell us about leadership under pressure? This is not a story about moral purity. It is a story about restraint, about timing, about perception, about knowing when clarity matters more than comfort. By the end of this video, you will understand why some leaders calm systems under pressure, while others, often with good intentions, make them more fragile. You will see why speeches in moments like these are not decoration, they are action. And you will understand why Machiavelli, often portrayed as the enemy of ethical leadership, may actually explain why Churchill succeeded without becoming the thing he fought against. This is a study of leadership at the edge of collapse. Not as a myth, not as motivation, but as a system.
Part 1. Machiavelli. Niccolò Machiavelli writes in a world where collapse is not an exception, it is the baseline. Italy in the early 16th century is fragmented into competing city-states. Power shifts constantly, alliances form and dissolve with speed. There is no long-term stability to rely on, no institutional memory that guarantees continuity. Authority must be constantly maintained. This context matters, because Machiavelli is not writing political philosophy in the abstract. He is writing forensic analysis. He studies failure, why rulers lose power, why states disintegrate, why moral intentions so often produce disastrous outcomes. His most important insight is also his most uncomfortable one. States do not collapse because leaders are immoral. They collapse because order breaks. This does not mean morality is irrelevant. It means morality depends on stability. In a functioning system, ethical norms can guide behavior. In a collapsing system, those same norms can accelerate chaos. From Machiavelli's perspective, the first responsibility of leadership is not virtue, it is preservation. This is why he prioritizes stability above moral consistency, because once stability disappears, no moral framework survives intact. This leads directly to his most misunderstood argument, the distinction between love and fear. Machiavelli does not glorify cruelty. He does not advocate terror for its own sake. What he is trying to understand is predictability. Love, he observes, is conditional. It depends on reciprocity, on expectations being met. Under uncertainty, love becomes volatile. Fear, by contrast, is more durable. But here is the critical nuance. Fear, for Machiavelli, is not about violence, it is about consequences. People fear what they can anticipate. They panic when consequences feel arbitrary. This is why Machiavelli repeatedly warns against hatred. Hatred is not fear. Hatred personalizes power. When people hate a ruler, they begin to imagine replacement. And the moment replacement becomes imaginable, conspiracies follow. Hatred dissolves restraint. So Machiavelli's argument is not be feared at all costs. It is never become unpredictable. This is also why appearance matters so much in his writing. Machiavelli understands something fundamental about human judgment. People do not evaluate leaders through introspection, they evaluate them through outcomes. They ask, does this work? Not, was this well intended? Perception in his framework is not superficial, it is structural. If authority appears weak, it becomes weak. If leadership appears confused, confusion spreads. This is why Machiavelli places such emphasis on decisiveness. Not because decisiveness is morally superior, but because hesitation creates openings. Openings invite alternatives. Alternatives invite instability. For Machiavelli, timing is everything. A delayed decision can be worse than a flawed one because delay allows events to decide instead. This is not cynicism, it is realism shaped by collapse. Machiavelli has seen how quickly order dissolves and how hard it is to restore. This is why The Prince often feels cold. It is not written to comfort, it is written to warn. And this is also why Machiavelli remains relevant, not because we live in Renaissance Italy, but because fear still operates the same way. Fear still compresses time, it still amplifies extremes, it still rewards clarity over nuance. Machiavelli gives us a language for this, a way to see leadership not as personality, but as a stabilizing function. He does not ask whether leaders are likable, he asks whether they hold systems together. And this brings us to a crucial point. Machiavelli is often portrayed as the enemy of ethical leadership, but this misses something important. He is not arguing against ethics, he is arguing against illusion. He understands that leaders who mistake moral intention for structural impact often do the most damage because they assume good motives will be enough. They are not. Under pressure, systems respond to signals, not intentions. This is the lens Machiavelli offers, and it is the lens through which we now look at 1940.
Part 2. Churchill enters. On May 10, 1940, Winston Churchill becomes Prime Minister of Britain. There is no transition period, no political honeymoon. The same day he takes office, German forces advance across Western Europe. Within weeks, France will collapse. Britain's situation is not yet hopeless, but it is fragile. The British Expeditionary Force is exposed on the continent. Evacuation is uncertain. Invasion is no longer abstract. Inside government, there is no consensus. Some ministers explore negotiation. Others argue for resistance at any cost. Churchill enters not as a unifying figure, but as a compromise forged by crisis. This matters because Churchill does not inherit authority. He has to create it, and he has to do so under conditions where mistakes are punished immediately. 3 days after taking office, Churchill delivers his first major address. He does not reassure. He does not soften the reality. He does not promise success. He offers only cost, blood, toil, tears, sweat. This speech is often remembered for its severity, but its function is misunderstood. It is not meant to inspire optimism. It is meant to align perception. Churchill understands something crucial. Under fear, people do not need hope. They need orientation. False optimism creates cognitive dissonance. When reality contradicts reassurance, trust collapses. By naming the cost up front, Churchill removes illusion. This does not reduce fear, but it stabilizes it. People know what to expect. Notice what Churchill avoids. He does not set timelines. He does not describe paths to victory. He does not speculate. This restraint is deliberate. Specific promises create future traps. They bind credibility to outcomes beyond control. By keeping the objective minimal, survival, Churchill preserves flexibility. This is leadership under constraint. Then comes Dunkirk. Hundreds of thousands of British soldiers are evacuated. The operation is later remembered as miraculous. At the time, it feels like near collapse.
The army is saved, but its equipment is lost, and the strategic position remains dire. Churchill's challenge now is subtle. Relief is dangerous. Relief invites complacency. If rescue is framed as victory, resolve dissolves. So Churchill speaks again. On June 4th, he delivers one of the most consequential speeches of the war. "We shall fight on the beaches." This speech does not describe strategy. It does not outline resources. It defines behavior. After this speech, surrender stops being imaginable, not legally, psychologically. Language closes doors. This is what Machiavelli would recognize immediately. Decision precedes outcome. By speaking decisively, Churchill narrows the range of future actions. He is not predicting victory, he is preventing collapse. This distinction is critical. Churchill's leadership here is not inspirational in the conventional sense, it is stabilizing. He does not eliminate fear, he gives it structure. He does not promise protection, he promises endurance. And endurance under pressure is often the most credible commitment available. What makes this moment remarkable is not Churchill's rhetoric, it is his restraint. He never turns fear inward, he never blames the population, he never threatens punishment. The burden is shared, the danger is collective. This prevents resentment, this preserves dignity. Churchill is not applying Machiavelli consciously, but he is operating within Machiavellian constraints. He understands that legitimacy under crisis comes from alignment with reality, not comfort, not charisma, clarity. And this is why Churchill's speeches are not decoration, they are action. They coordinate expectations, they synchronize behavior, they stabilize a system under strain. Churchill does not defeat fear, he contains it, and that containment buys time. Time for alliances, time for resources, time for survival. This is crisis leadership at its most precise, not heroic, functional.
Comparison 3. Coalitions and loyalty. Power rarely collapses from the outside first. It usually collapses from within. Machiavelli understood this better than most. In his world, states did not fall because enemies were strong. They fell because internal alliances dissolved. Loyalty shifted. Key actors defected. Centers of authority multiplied. This is why Machiavelli places such emphasis on coalitions, not alliances in the idealistic sense, but proximity to power. For Machiavelli, loyalty is not a feeling, it is a relationship maintained through structure. Rulers who believe loyalty is permanent are already in danger, because loyalty under pressure is conditional. It depends on perceived strength, on predictability, on whether staying aligned feels safer than seeking alternatives. This is where many leaders fail. They focus on external threats, while internal cohesion erodes quietly. Machiavelli warns repeatedly against this blindness, because once key groups begin to imagine life without the ruler, power is already weakening. Coalitions, in his framework, are not about harmony, they're about containment, keeping potential rivals close, integrating competing interests, reducing the number of independent power centers. This logic becomes immediately relevant in Britain in 1940, because Churchill does not inherit unity, he inherits fragmentation. The British political system is divided. There are factions advocating negotiation, others advocating resistance, others hesitating entirely. Churchill's authority is not absolute, it is provisional. And this is crucial, because provisional authority requires constant reinforcement. Churchill's solution is structural. He forms a war cabinet that includes political opponents. This is not generosity, it is consolidation. By bringing rivals into the center, he removes their ability to organize alternatives. Disagreement does not disappear, but it is contained. Debate happens behind closed doors. Publicly, the system speaks with one voice.
Machiavelli would immediately recognize this move because it follows a core principle. It is safer to manage conflict inside the system than let it form outside. External opposition hardens. Internal opposition can be negotiated. Churchill does not seek unanimous belief. He seeks unified action. This distinction matters because loyalty under pressure does not require agreement, it requires alignment. Churchill allows dissent, but he does not allow fragmentation. This is why coalition management is one of the least visible but most decisive aspects of his leadership. It prevents the emergence of competing centers of legitimacy. There is one direction, one authority. This does not mean there is no tension. There is, but tension is contained, and containment preserves stability. Machiavelli would describe this as prudent rule, not because it is moral, but because it is stabilizing. Leaders who isolate themselves believe they are protecting authority. In reality, they accelerate collapse. Churchill does the opposite. He absorbs opposition. He limits alternatives. He reduces uncertainty inside the system. This prevents panic from becoming political, because political panic is far more dangerous than public fear. When elites lose confidence, systems unravel quickly. Churchill understands this instinctively. He keeps elites close. He keeps decisions centralized. He prevents the multiplications of narratives. This is coalition management, is crisis containment, not inspirational, functional. And it works, because loyalty under pressure is not sustained by affection. It is sustained by structure. Machiavelli would approve, because this is exactly how power survives when conditions deteriorate. Comparison 4. Timing and decision. If there was one concept Machiavelli returns to again and again, it is timing. Not morality, not ideology, timing. For Machiavelli, the difference between survival and collapse often comes down to when a decision is made, not whether it is perfect. Because in a crisis, delay is not neutral. Delay allows events to decide for you. And when events decide, leaders lose control over perception. Hesitation signals weakness, and weakness invites alternatives. This is why Machiavelli places such emphasis on decisiveness, not rashness, but commitment. A flawed decision made early can often be corrected. A delayed decision creates irreversible dynamics. This insight applies directly to Churchill's leadership in 1940. Churchill's speeches are often remembered for their language, but their real power lies in their timing. Each major speech arrives at a moment when uncertainty peaks, not before, not after, exactly then. This is not accidental. Churchill understands that uncertainty is psychologically exhausting. Left unresolved, it pushes people towards extremes, either towards panic or towards false hope. Both are dangerous. By intervening with speech at moments of maximum uncertainty, Churchill performs an act of coordination. He narrows the range of imaginable futures. This is critical, because people do not need to know what will happen. They need to know what they are expected to do. Churchill's speeches answer that question, not with detail, with direction. We shall fight. This is not a plan, it is a commitment, and commitments simplify decision-making. After that speech, a wide range of options disappears. Negotiation becomes illegitimate. Hesitation becomes suspect. Language closes doors. This is exactly what Machiavelli means when he warns against letting events dictate action. By acting decisively, leaders shape perception, and perception shapes behavior. Churchill's decisions are not perfect, but they are timely, and timeliness preserves authority. Contrast this with leaders who delay communication, who wait for clarity before speaking. In a crisis, clarity often never arrives. Waiting becomes paralysis. Machiavelli would call this fatal, because silence creates space, and space fills quickly with speculation. Churchill never allows that space to remain open for long. He speaks often enough to keep the narrative contained. Not daily, not impulsively, but at decisive moments. This cadence matters. It prevents rumor from becoming dominant. It prevents fear from mutating. Speech becomes a stabilizing force, not because it reassures, but because it coordinates. This is leadership as temporal control, managing not only what is said, but when it is said. Machiavelli understands this deeply because he sees politics as a sequence of moments. Miss the moment and the opportunity disappears. Churchill repeatedly meets the moment, not with certainty, but with commitment. This is why his leadership holds, not because he predicts the future, but because he shapes the present. Timing here is the difference between authority and irrelevance, between leadership and reaction. And this is Machiavelli's final lesson. Power does not survive because leaders are correct. It survives because they act, before hesitation becomes dominant. Churchill embodies this, not consciously Machiavellian, but functionally aligned. He understands that in a crisis, decision itself is stabilizing, and that sometimes the most important choice is to choose. The end. We have covered a lot of ground. 2 figures, 2 centuries, 1 recurring problem. How leadership works when fear becomes dominant. Machiavelli explains power. Churchill demonstrates it. The strongest leaders are not softer. They are not harder. They are clearer. Clarity reduces uncertainty, and reducing uncertainty is the first real act of leadership in any crisis. If this way of looking at leadership was useful to you, if it helps you see power, fear, and authority a little more clearly, then this channel is made for you. Here, we look at leadership, history, and strategy without myths, without motivational slogans, and without easy answers. If you want more episodes like this, consider subscribing to the channel. It helps the algorithm, but more importantly, it helps this series continue. And if you want to go deeper, come back for the next episode. We will look at other moments where systems were under pressure and leadership made the difference between collapse and survival. Before you go, I would genuinely like to hear from you. In moments of pressure, in your work, your teams, or your organization, what matters more, inspiration or clarity? Leave your thoughts in the comments, and I'll see you in the next episode.